What is your definition of BIM?
Regarding to BIM, Petru, is what I learned. The two key words I learned, during my masters is BIM is about collaboration and communication. I even like to say the three C's, which is collaboration, communication, and coordination. You need to have these, and it doesn't really matter the in my opinion which tool we use. You use Revit, use Archicad, or use anything from Bentley. I don't know. Anyway, there's not a point to mention names here. It's not about that. Definitely, it's about the process. How we're going to deliver. Because at the end, what we're looking for in a BIM process is to organize our data. Organize our information. We even have non-graphical. We know this is non-graphical data, graphical data. But that is about organizing and deliver these. But I think we honestly, if you ask me, Petra, about we're still far away of really achieving something really, very good. I think we are average now in terms of what we develop and the process we're trying to classify. But for example, having all these, processes in place and these naming conventions, these rules, that is going to be is going to make a big difference, into digital automation. Because many people don't understand, but you only can automate what is process-based, what is rule-based. And this is one of the key fundamentals for creating solutions, digital solutions. And if we can't control the parameters, the fields, the attributes, we can't code. And this is very important. And it will open doors. But I think we're still far away and to achieving, a great BIM process. But definitely, BIM for me is about collaboration and communication, and if you can add the coordination part, which is also is important, because if you look and if you ask me for examples, of course through models, and we can collaborate and communicate much better, and even coordinate, because we can see things in a different way. But also it's about the naming convention, which in the UK, for example, on level 1, it was very important, that naming convention, the OLBS standard that they have, 1192, to define the naming convention. So every time you go to a project, for example, you know exactly, what kind of document are you reading, just for the name. So this is about codification. And that's one of the things I don't still see a lot, even now, because we provide a lot of support to our plugins. And we got, sometimes access to models for testing purpose and to check some of the bugs. And I don't see that happening. And it's very wild at the moment. And I think we're still failing, in many aspects, my opinion. And I see that because I see also a lot of people sharing samples on LinkedIn about what they do. And I like to look to the drawings, and I don't see sometimes naming conventions in drawings at all, and it's very wild. And this is one of the basic things anyway, for example, on the BIM process, and which people still fail. And also about the data, the naming convention, there's no organization in terms of naming. It's always messy. I'm not saying, the process we do as well, we've done in the past, they were perfect, but I think as a global society, we're still far away from, achieving what we should be achieving.
So there's different definitions depending who you ask. So certainly the concepts and principles that I would identify with are more encompassing, and they are captured now in the international standard series ISO 19650, ISO 19650, and they approach BIM as a whole life approach to managing information for assets, so physical assets. So I see BIM in through the eyes of these standards. So it's more about clearly managing information at all phases. So not only the design, the construct, which most people are focused on, but through into the operational use of the asset and the potential decommission or repurpose. So it's a whole. So I'm simplifying it here because obviously there's a standard which describes it, but essentially it's about a whole lifetime approach to managing information about the built environment and built assets. And these standards are originally from the UK, or the precursor standards, should I say. and which were called BS and PAS, PAS 1192-1192. So it's more about information management, and it's not just about construction. And a lot of people, so that's what I understand BIM to be, and I'm a sort of practitioner in information governance, information management, so that works for me. There's a lot of people who interpret BIM not wrongly, because it's always what it used to be, and certainly is for a lot of people, as far as 3D modeling or 4D modeling, which would have time. And that's originally where the terminology comes from. So it's not that they're wrong, it's that the scope is different, their focus. And certainly 3D models and 4D, 5D models are part of the key information deliverables. So it's a question of scope. It's a question of, if you're talking about a thing, as in a model, that would be the more traditional interpretation, or you're talking about a process or an activity or an approach, which is more what we mean in the international standards now.
That's a bit of a loaded question, because everybody has a sort of a different opinion. But I'll give my personal opinion, and that is that BIM needs to be structured data about a building. And that's the key word here. It needs to be structured. So for example, if you are just having data about your building in a spreadsheet format, I don't call that structured. There is no standardization. It is not easily understood by a random person. They will have to understand your structure first. And unfortunately, that's what most of the industry is doing. If you are just purely developing BIM models using proprietary software and proprietary data formats, you are creating unstructured data, in my opinion, because that data cannot be then interpreted by anybody. They need to use a certain platform. They need to see how Revit or ArchiCAD or Tekla, whatever, has organized it in their way. And very often, especially when you create custom attributes or custom parameters, the data becomes even more messy. So as a result, I don't see the difference between a typical Revit or proprietary model and somebody on an Excel spreadsheet typing things out manually. There's very little difference to me. Where I see structure is when people are able to produce data that complies with an open data specification. And there are a variety out there, but the most popular one is IFC. And so in my opinion, if you are capable of producing data that describes your building in an open data format, one of which is IFC, then I consider that to be BIM. But that is just my personal opinion. Other people will have many different interpretations, and there's no saying which is right or wrong. But in my opinion, for BIM data to be actually useful, it needs to be clean, and the only way to guarantee it is clean is for it to be in an open data format.
Well, let's back up with that one touch. So part of my journey in BIM to get to the bottom of this and find answers and help bring it back to people, what I learned is that for a good 20 years or so now, there's been a group of people, very smart, dedicated people, who put a ton of work into developing what is really the modern BIM process we're using today. And really, they did an outstanding job. So that goes from Project Avante to the British BS 1192 standards and to the new ISO, which just came out in 2018 and which is getting fabulous adoption worldwide. So that work, it's all done. But what they didn't do so well was really getting the message out to everyone, or let's say the people that need to hear it first, that is the owners. So the people that really kicked this whole thing off, they just never heard it. And so that's a problem. So it's like, okay, we need to take the marketing out in a whole different direction. So people like me, like, yeah, we get it, but that on itself isn't very helpful. And then, so it's your actual question. So what is BIM? BIM is a process. It's a process for how we generate, manage, and reuse the data that is generated during design, construction, and operations of any built asset. And then there are supporting tools and all sorts of nifty and fun features that we can sort of tack onto that, that we all know, be it 3D modeling and augmented reality and, field devices and stuff like that. That's great. But at the heart of the matter, it's a process for efficiency. So it's not about doing things quicker, it's about doing things in a more efficient and thought out manner. So one of the issues too, when you're doing clients, it's naturally, they hear about it and they say, okay, that's awesome, give it to me next week. And it's like, no. This is something, yeah, exactly. But this is something you say, no, you know what? Let's take our time. Let's really think this through. Because if you put out the wrong equation, it's not going to work. And that's what this is about. It's really about getting things right the first time. So you have to think about that. You want to test it, you want to vet it, you want to double and triple check it. And then when you're certain, let's put it out on the street. Because if we rush it, we're just going to create a new mess. And then people are saying, oh, BIM is great. Well, no, BIM actually works great when you let it.
It's a 3D representation of a database. And so it's the blending of a model with a database behind it and established relationships within that geometry based on the data of the database.
What is the meaning and what do we have in the database?
All of the information about the building. So it's a database. Have you ever seen one exported?
One exported what? IFC model?
The database of a Revit model?
No.
So you can actually just export the entire database and look at it. Yeah. And it's one of those things that, like, once you start looking at that, I feel like BIM just makes sense. The entire thing is broken up with tables. And so, like, going all the way back of, like, what's a database? It's just a collection of spreadsheets that are related in some way. And so the spreadsheets, or they're called tables, are each category of things inside of Revit. So like Revit, there's visibility categories of casework, walls, structural columns, structural floors. And so there's a table for the type and a table for the instance. And the type is that class of object. And it would be like, if it's casework, what type of casework is this? Is it a base cabinet? Is it an upper cabinet? What's the size of it? Does it have shelves? What's it made out of? Who's the manufacturer? And what's the cost? And then if it's the instance, then you're talking about, like, where in the building is that cabinet at and how many of these are here. And those are stored separately in the database. And it does that for every single category inside of Revit. And so all of this information can be pushed and pulled. And as you move the geometry in Revit, the database is updating the information about these things.
How is this database meant to be used and by whom? Like, are we talking just about the database that the designer is making and delivering to the contractor who is building the building?
Good question. It depends who's using it for what and when. Because, like, we're talking about digital twins, like that same database transfers into that it's about transferring of data. The database is a schema of a way to store information about a building. And so that's why it is building information modeling. And usually it's not great for site stuff. It's not great outside of multiple buildings. And you have to start adding in information to collect it all together. And that's totally doable, but it becomes about, like, transferring information from one spot to the other. And so the software programs that seem to do it best are the ones that are relating to it. And so they figure out, like, what's the unique identifier of the thing inside of Revit. And so there's information the designer cares about. Let them deal with that stuff. They care about the look, the feel, the size, the requirements. The contractor cares about how to install that thing. They have a whole different set of requirements around whatever object you're looking at than the designer does. And then the owner cares how to maintain it. And so you don't have to store it all in the same database, but you do have to transfer it from one to the other as needed. And I think that's probably one of the things that we're really getting into now as an industry. And, like, Assemble does it really well. They can search a model and pair outside data. So you can do a lot of cost estimating real time based on the design model without having to like maintain a separate model. It's more of just associating data to assets.